It's the Ron Johnson Show on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Got a loaded show for today. Damian Johnson, Gophers basketball great, is going to join us. He's the high school basketball coach at Benil St. Margaret, but also Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has kind of wanted to get the media off his back. He doesn't want to be a distraction all season, so he did something that is more Kirk-like than I can even imagine. And hopefully the people will give him credit for this. But we'll talk about that coming up next on the Ron Johnson Show.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcasts. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. Now the Ron Johnson Show. On the field, in the broadcast booth, Ron Johnson is Minnesota sports. He's played with them, hung out with them, and grown up with all the big names in Minnesota sports. They're hanging out with Ron Johnson. It's the Ron Johnson Show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. And it starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Ron Johnson Show, and I'm your host, Ron Johnson, on Locked On Sports Minnesota. We're just going to jump into this, but remember, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Just make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started today. Sam Ekstrom is my producer. He's going to join me on the show. We're going to jump right into this. I tease Kirk Cousins. I'm not going to even draw it out for you people. I'm not going to keep you waiting any longer. Kirk Cousins, this is what he said. He won't be discussing his contract until March with the Vikings, which means after the season. Are we watching Kirk's final year in purple? That's the question of the day. Is this Kirk's final year? I'm going to let you start, Sam. What do you think?
Well, this is what I've seen in the past, Ron. When players are about to hit free agency and they say, we'll discuss my contract after the season. And when free agency is offering them millions upon millions of dollars to play elsewhere, it seems rare that teams circle back to where they were before. Now with Kirk, I think it's maybe a little different. I think Kirk likes having continuity. I think he likes having roots. I don't think he wants to go from city to city. I think he'd prefer to be a Viking for a long time, and he said that. But the question is it mutual? Will the Vikings want him back at that point? Because they're doing everything they can, Ron, to clear cap, kind of pave the way for maybe a rookie quarterback to take this thing over. So I tend to think it is. I tend to think it is his last year for a couple of those reasons. What's your take on it?
I think it's going to depend on where the Vikings finish the season. I'm completely honest. If the Vikings make a run, I mean deep, like NFC North championship game, here's the problem. You're not going to have an early first-round pick, so you're going to have to make a lot of decisions to get up to 20 to maybe get a J.J. McCarthy. maybe we're holding J.J. McCarthy too high. Maybe he is a bottom of the like Lamar Jackson, Teddy Bridgewater type that can come in and be a starter and be very good for you. Lamar Jackson, great for you. Jalen Hurts, second round for you. Dak Prescott, fourth round for you. So it doesn't matter. Tom Brady, sixth round for you, and Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant for you. So finding a quarterback is not always about the first round. I guarantee, and I have not had time, maybe I'll be on the plane to Colorado, which is a decent flight. I know I'm going to watch some movies because I got some movies I haven't seen yet because I know, Sam, that's not what you do on the plane. But like Creed 3, I haven't seen it. I'm ready for Creed 3. I haven't seen that yet. Fast and Furious 10, have not seen that yet. There's a couple movies that I have not seen that I'm holding off on because I told my wife that. I'm like, there's no point of us going to see these now or streaming them now. Let's just wait. We got a long flight. We both can share the iPad and have the dual headphone Bluetooth deal going, and we can watch them. And so my other thing, I'll research first round quarterbacks versus second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth round quarterbacks and who's had the better like long-term starting opportunities. Because I think, the Peyton Mannings, the Drew Breeses, you're going to find more Dak Prescott's, Russell Wilson's, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just captive of the moment right now with Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy and Tom Brady. But I do feel like there's a lot more first-round busts. And maybe because they're showing us those guys. Hey, look at all these first-round picks at quarterback that did not make it. They're not telling us, like, look at all these second, third, fourth, fifth round quarterbacks that did make it and are now starters and got paid big money. But I personally feel like this might be the last year if it's an early departure. Like if they are 9-8, if they don't win 10 wins, if they don't win 10 games, for sure it's his last year. That's first. They have to win 10 games at least for them to feel like, okay, Kirk can get this done. We just need to get some more defensive pieces in this draft. But if he doesn't win more than 10, I could see this being done. If they do have the pick, maybe they do try to sign Kirk to maybe a 2-year deal, knowing they're going to draft J.J. McCarthy. And there's some other quarterbacks, and I haven't gone through them yet, but that's just the first name that was thrown out. That's tied to him, 6'3", 200 pounds. It fits. Can move. Young. Can maybe win you a championship on a rookie deal. That's what it's all about nowadays. Can you get a championship on a rookie deal? Because Joe Burrow, all these guys, Josh Allen, their windows are closing, and now they're having to get big money, which means now there's not enough money for the other positions. But if Kirk does go deep, NFC Championship, maybe Super Bowl, I can't see them parting ways with the Super Bowl losing quarterback or even a Final Four quarterback. That's tough for somebody to get you to the NFC Championship game, lose, and then you're like, we're done. Let's move on. But now I will say, if it's a 41 donut or 41-7 type game like the Eagles, I could see them moving on. If they lose to the Eagles again 41-7, I could see them moving on from Kirk. Because I've told you this, Sam. I feel like this league is very emotional. Decisions are made off emotions. Contracts are given off emotions. Stephon Diggs, $72 million. That was emotions. Now he deserved it, but it was emotions. That's where I think a lot. Josh Allen, when they really wanted to pay him, you think about that. What did that look like? I think that's the key is how do you not make an Adam Thielen? His big, yes, he's worth it, but if he wasn't a Minnesota guy, I don't see them paying him what they paid him, $64 million. I don't see that. I think a lot of, so there is some emotion in this. That's what I think you have to understand, with the some of these contracts. And so Kirk Cousins, you lose, the emotions go the other way. Oh, we're done. We're moving on. We can't do this. Joe Flacco, highest, got the highest pick, won a Super Bowl. Emotions. Went to McDonald's right after too, but emotions. That was emotional pick or emotional contract for Joe Flacco. Because now you look back on it, everybody's like, oh, that was a stupid extension. That was a stupid signing. Joe Flacco wasn't worth that, but it was the Super Bowl. He made some big time plays. He played out of his mind. So again, I could see them making an emotional contract offer to Kirk Cousins if he makes a strong run down to the Final Four and the NFC Championship. But I do feel like signs pointing towards this is the last year for Kirk Cousins. But I do appreciate, and this is where I go with that, the tease. A lot of quarterbacks wouldn't have done that. They would have played that game where they would have left the door open for their agent to talk to the team all season, all off season. It becomes a absolute distraction. Because the media is going to ask every day, where are you guys at? Have you guys come to a conclusion yet? 4 or 5, what do you want? How long do you think you could play, Kirk? You're in your mid 30s. Do you think you could play to 40, 41, 42? Or do you think you're, all that? Hey, I'm done till March. Now nobody has to ask. Nobody has to. Now, if somebody does ask, then it's a party foul. And I hope every other reporter in that room says, dude, he said March. March. We're going to talk about my contract in March. Let's go through this offseason. Let's play. Let's be ready for that. And I think that's the smartest thing to do for them. That's why I'm glad Kirk Cousins did it. But we got to move on to Damian Johnson. Damian Johnson is going to join us. Former Gopher basketball player, Gopher legend, all-time list of blocks, steals. He's up there. Just check him out. But we are going to have him join me on the Hang with Ron Johnson segment. But we have a word from our sponsors.
We're brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook today. It's the official sportsbook partner of Locked On, and you can race to FanDuel and get in on the action with baseball. Yes, the Twins are hosting the Red Sox tonight. Hasn't gone well for them. They'll try to turn things around at home at Target Field, and you can bet the money line, the run total at FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can sign up and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Don't miss your chance to join the crowd at FanDuel. Everybody who's getting in on the fun, they've got great promotions. You get paid instantly. It's easy to use. FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is the official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission.
Well, for those that don't know, Damian Johnson played at the University of Minnesota, played overseas in Japan and Australia. But the biggest thing that you might not know about Damian Johnson is he's a high school basketball coach. And this is the reason why I wanted to get Damian Johnson on the show. One, he's a Gopher, so come on, man. Two, he's a hooper, so I always love to chop it up with hoopers. I'm a hooper at heart. People know that every time I get some football players on, we talk a little hoops. And so I might have to talk to Damian about that too, about if his old school team were to go against some of these new school football players, so not basketball, how would they handle themselves? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that a little bit. But Damian Johnson coaches at Benil St. Margaret's, and I work for Game One. We service them with their uniforms and apparel and equipment, and so it's kind of a cool relationship. But then I was like, man, you know what? This relationship, we can go further, man. Like we just aren't Gophers. You know, I just don't supply you uniforms and apparel, man. We can chop it up because we chop it up off camera all the time anyway. So I'm like, man, let's put this on camera. So Damian Johnson, man, thank you for joining me in the Hang with Ron Johnson segment on the Locked On Sports Podcast Network. Question for you, starting out, man. You played high-level college basketball. You went overseas and played professional basketball, and then you came back and you coach high school basketball. And now you're at Benil St. Margaret's. How hard is that for you to know? Because you know what you did to get there. How hard is that sometimes to get those kids to understand this is what it's going to take to get there? And you can see immense talent, you can see ridiculous ability, but then they don't have that, that it that is going to get them there.
Oh man, that's something that I deal with every day. That's something I was discussing with them yesterday a little bit. It's just, I think a lot of kids, and it's harder for me to realize right at this age, how I was at that age, but a lot of kids who are uber talented, the process sometimes comes easy and they don't realize how hard it's going to get once you get to the next level. And in my opinion, my job as a coach is to kind of prepare them and give them all the tools to be able to be prepared to step in the next level, ready to go. But sometimes it's just hard to get them because everybody and they got so many distractions now. Like I couldn't imagine having a phone in my hand that I could research anything I wanted to, see anybody at any time I want just from a FaceTime call. So it's a lot more that's at the palm of their hands. But at the same time, I also don't fully remember. I know people try to push me. My dad used to tell me to lift weights all the time in high school, and I never touched the weights. So I never thought about it. So sometimes it's easy to forget how you were at that age, but you do know you could kind of push kids and help them get to that next step early if they listen to the feedback you're giving them.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, man. It's them wanting to do it. My dad I remember my dad telling me all kinds of stories about how he worked out and how hard he ran the hills and how hard he did this. And I was blessed with friends like Spice Adams, Jeff McCall. They both lived not too far from me. And so I would get calls every night like, yo, what time you want to work out? Because my dad would talk to them. Like my dad was not just my dad. He was a father figure to a lot of other men that I played with, and so he was my baseball coach. He was a basketball coach for us. So he was telling all these kids, like, this is how you can get there. He was a scout for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So guys could see him scouting other college kids coming back, wherever he would go. He was a regional scout for the Steelers. And so what people don't understand is like Spice Adams would call me. He'd drive up to my house, idiot, park on my grass, get in trouble, but try to wake me up at 5:36 in the morning. And I remember somebody else telling that story. And I had forgotten. I'm like, you know what? This idiot did drive on my front lawn. Like, I couldn't imagine now, because now looking at my house and me as a parent, I wish one of my kids' friends would drive on my grass to pick my daughter up for softball. I would be like, if you don't get your tail off my grass right now, like, and so now thinking back to my mom, like Spice thought it was funny because he was a comedian always. Like people don't really, like Spice didn't become a social media comedian. Spice was always funny. But I couldn't imagine because I hate when kids walk across my grass now. I'm that guy. I'm Stanley from Friday, but I hate when kids walk across my grass. Not in my front lawn. I mean, like not playing. If you're playing out there with the kids, fine. But I'm just saying, like for no reason, you're riding your bike across. Like, dude, there's a sidewalk right there. Just stay on the sidewalk till you get to my driveway. Yeah. So I am that guy. So I couldn't imagine driving up. But we were blessed as friends to be able to push each other. And so explain that to my daughter. But man, I see a ton of social media posts. But all the things, your kids are doing now with all these extra camps and all this extra stuff. And that's tough because here's the thing. Not every kid is doing these like showcases and these camps. Not every kid is ending up on social media where you as a coach can see the extra work. So how do players check in with you in high school, at least to let you know, hey, coach, I am putting in the extra work when you can't directly do it for them?
Well, I know like one of the biggest things I feel like is that I have a lot of good relationships with my players. So we message and everything. And for the most part, kids going to let me know. And I also get to see see the work. I joke around a lot and say stuff just to get a reaction and see how the response is. So a lot of stuff I'm just testing to see if they doing anything, and I'll just throw something out there and see how someone else respond and see how the player themselves respond to it. So for the most part, I know all my guys putting in extra work. We got a lot of guys that's just they're very hungry to succeed and get to the next level, and they're very talented. And they got a lot of good support around them, pushing them there. So it's me less worrying about them and more challenging them to take another step, go even harder or something like that. So that's most of the part, because all these kids, I would say at least 50 to 60% of kids right now in high school hoops train with someone. It's like a different back when I was playing, it was rare that you could work out with a trainer. Now they got so many, so the market's so saturated, whereas they can work out at any given moment with someone who's doing it. So a lot of these kids get extra work in just because they're trying to keep up with the Joneses.
And just for people to know, like, because a lot of coaches, and this is not saying I don't hate it, I do hate it a little bit. A lot of coaches that I run into, people, period, they always want to, like I always say this, and Dame, you know this, man, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. And so you know where that's from. And so, for all the Jay-Z fans out there, I live by that. And I always tell people that you can tell me whatever you want about your career. You can tell me whatever you want about your circumstance or your coach, or, I had a knee injury or this held me back. But the numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. So for those who don't know Damian Johnson, because he's a humble dude, I'll give him that. 127 games at the University of Minnesota, finished his career second in the Gophers all-time steals list with 195 steals. Now, I mean, what are you, 6'9", 6'8", give or take?
6'7",
6'7". Okay. But with shoes on, though, you're like 6'8". So for a guy that played a big role, because you were kind of a wing, but a big. Yeah. You had 195 steals, man. What, as a guy at 6'7", 6'8", maybe being asked more to guard bigs and stuff like that, how did you understand? Like, was it passing lanes? Was it just you had good hands? What all led into that saying, you know what? Like, I'm not just a 6'7", 6'8" big. I'm gonna go after the ball too and get some steals.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things growing up. I played a lot of different sports, so it's kind of, they worked hand in hand. Kind of some of the stuff I took from one sport to the next, like timing. I played center field in baseball. It was easy for me to kind of play when I had to play half court, and during the press, it was easy for me to read the ball, read when somebody pitched it up the court. The other thing is I did a lot of film study. So a lot of the times I was getting steals off just knowing the plays, knowing what's going to happen, and just baiting somebody into throwing the pass. Like I always played football. I played either in a defense. I played free safety at one point or defensive end. So I just always just kind of was around stuff where I picked up little habits, and it kind of translated to basketball once I just put all my focus into that. And the main thing though, I was able to play the passing lanes with my length, but I always kind of knew. I always was a step ahead of knowing the play where I could gamble. And even when I gambled, I just knew the next step on the next action. So I was able to recover from that too. As far as, finishing top two and steals, I was pretty high in blocks too. And that's just for me. That's just for me being able to use my length and time and then recovering from that as well. So.
Yeah, well, you third all time on the Gophers blocks list with 191 blocks, so 194 steals, 191 blocks. That's big time defensive stuff when a lot of guys are so focused on their footwork in the offensive game. You see that now. Everybody's working on offensive drills. You rarely, and I mean rarely, like never on Twitter or Instagram, see people posting defensive basketball drills. Like you don't see these trainers posting defensive basketball drills, like how to get to the block, how to block without fouling, how to steal a ball without pushing a guy over and reaching. Like you said, understanding footwork and being able to go with your left or your right to get a steal. You don't see people teaching that. You see a lot of people teaching all this crossover stuff, putting chairs there, throwing darts at them so they know how to dodge a dart with a ball in their hand. Like it's a lot of crazy stuff out there, but I will tell people, if you can play defense, if you can block, there's a spot for you on somebody's team. And Damian Johnson's a testament to that. Also, top 5 Gophers all time in stats. And so, again, numbers lie. Or sorry, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. The numbers don't lie. The man did his thing at the University of Minnesota. So I hope when kids hear him, I hope when people hear this podcast and they're like, man, who is Damian Johnson? understand this man's for real. Like some people just don't get up there and post every day, and they're not about what they used to do. Unless you see, I do see Damian and Trevor Mbakwe and these guys going at Jordan Taylor every once in a while. But that's usually about it whenever there's a Wisconsin guy in the building. Speaking of that, man, you're at Benilde St. Margaret's, home of Jordan Taylor. He was on our show as well. Benilde St. Margaret, great. Wisconsin, great. Plays overseas. When he comes back, I know he helps out every once in a while. How hard is that to not just like go at him about Wisconsin stuff?
Oh man, to be honest, we're real cordial about it. That's something we used to do a lot more, definitely, because he used to talk so much smack about Fleck, and I used to always, I'm glad to see the transition where we slowly starting to transition to be a better football school than Wisconsin. But yeah, so it's a lot more talking about other sports than basketball. Talk about the times we played against each other. If anything, we'll talk a little bit about this year and whatever, but we don't even talk about the battles we had or anything.
And when you look at Coach Fleck, because you brought that up, I want to ask you about that. Row the boat. When you're a Gopher, I saw Lindsay Whalen. She was at football games. I see you guys show up every once in a while. When Coach Fleck took over, row the boat became a thing in Minnesota. How was that for you as just an alumni? Like, what did you think about the whole transition and then the row the boat culture?
Just watching all of it just unfold, it's just been amazing. Just even looking at his recruiting class now. One of the things that's huge in Minnesota is keeping kids home, and the way he's keeping kids home, especially this year, you keeping all the top guys, that's amazing. And he's a guy that knows his identity, knows how to sell his identity, sell a program, and the way he's building a program and getting us. I mean, if you look at the last 5, this is a time where we're consistently have a chance to compete to go to the championship game. And I mean, if we just take care of business versus Iowa, we finally could play in the Big Ten championship game. And I think, we're not far from taking the next step, but we've been consistent, and that's what I like to see. I thought during Mason days we were kind of consistent, but we were one step away from taking that next step. I think we kind of crossed that a little bit. Kill had us consistent, but we didn't take the next step. I think right now we're taking the next step, and I think we're going to just continue to grow from there. And I love that he embraces Minnesota. So that's the part that you got to love. And he's what you want to represent the program, represent the school as a football coach.
Yeah, and talking about recruiting, keeping kids in Minnesota, unfortunately, I got to say it, a kid out of Jefferson High School. I know he's being recruited for football. PJ Fleck was recruiting for football. Ben Johnson, not sure how that basketball relationship went, but he chose the University of Wisconsin. You mentioned that you had hung with some Wisconsin coaches. But what is it about Wisconsin from a basketball standpoint? Because from a football standpoint, like you said, PJ has nailed it down. And it wasn't Ben Johnson, it was Richard Pitino with Jalen Suggs mentioned that, oh man, I was kind of in with PJ Fleck with football, but I just didn't feel like Richard Pitino wanted me at Minnesota. We've heard, I had Theo John on the show, and Theo John talked about McKinley Wright's, recruitment to Minnesota for basketball and how he ended up going to Colorado. Theo John, had already kind of said, well, I'm not going to follow McKinley Wright. I'm going to go to Marquette. He said it wasn't up in the air that maybe both of them would go to Minnesota, but it never was really offered that way. And then both of them became really good college basketball players, clearly. But when you look at the recruiting now, you still kind of see that inkling of like kids that you think should be offered, the kid from Wayzata. You don't see those Minnesota offers being thrown out early like PJ. Maybe you have way more scholarships in football. We know that. There's about 88 in football, or 85 in football. I think basketball has maybe 12 total or 10 total. I'm not sure how
13.
That works. Is it 13?
Yeah.
And then you got to spread out the money. You maybe can get 8 fulls and then some halves. And so when you think about those scholarships, you could have 13 scholarship players, or you can have 10 and then spread out the rest. You have guys already on scholarship, so you can't really offer another full X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of factors in this. But when you look at Wisconsin, again, constantly Jordan Taylor's now, was it Daniel Freitag is his name? I think is his name, right? Going to Wisconsin. What is it about the Wisconsin program for basketball that continues to kind of cherry pick these Minnesota kids to come? And it doesn't work. And I will say this to people, man, it doesn't work out for everybody. Because I think it was Kerwin, I think it was a kid's name, or not Kerwin. He went to North Carolina. There was another kid from like Hopkins Tonka went to Wisconsin and never played. And then he started transferring. Yeah. Yep. And so, it doesn't always work where you look at those same kids sitting on Wisconsin bench. Everybody's not Jordan Taylor. You go to Wisconsin, you might not play, but you go to Minnesota, you probably will get a chance to play because you're a hometown kid. If you were good enough, they're going to find somewhere to put you. But what are your thoughts on that right now with Wisconsin?
One of the things I could say that's probably the biggest factor is Wisconsin gets involved very early with some of those kids, and like Freetag, I remember him going to the elite camp when he was a freshman or a sophomore, and he got his first offer from Wisconsin, so that was huge. So being able to get in early, kind of, and you being the first, always just going to stick out to a kid. And the other part is some of the kids, I mean, a lot of the kids from Lakeville North, and they just probably got a stranglehold on Wisconsin got a stranglehold on Lakeville North kids. So that's a different thing. But like Freetag going there, and there's a chance that McAndrews from Wayzata goes there too. Those three played on the AAU team together, so they just had a relationship. So it's kind of something that's been in the works for a while. Just those guys like playing with each other, and it's a relationship that's there that's just kind of Wisconsin benefited from. But they also been involved with some of my guys and stuff, and my guys 2025. And we got one that's 2026 that they really like. So they work. Joe Krabbenhoff, we had phone conversations. They work very hard to do what they do, and they understand like they might not get every top Wisconsin kid, but they're going to go to the next state over and try their hardest to build relationships with coaches and everything to get those guys. Ben, as far as Ben, I mean, Ben does build relationships and everything. He's been getting local kids. Not gonna get all the top ones, but at the same time, the state of Minnesota basketball program compared to Wisconsin is a lot different. I mean, we're not coming off multiple years where we're in the top 5 of the Big Ten or anything. We're kind of still working our way back from the bottom.
Yeah, and I don't know. And you brought up AAU. You brought up guys on AAU teams wanting to stay together, maybe, doing a good job of recruiting each other. If the coach is like, hey, I offered you, can you help me out with so-and-so? And the NBA is even the AAU type atmosphere now where guys want to play with their boys. You see Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. You see LeBron James now trying to get Chris Paul and Draymond Green to the Lakers. Like, you see a lot of this now. You see a lot of AAU type mentalities where, it's not the Jordan days, the Isaiah Thomas days where, look, I'm going to play with my team. This is my team I was given. This is the hand I was dealt. I'm going to play it. And I hate everybody else. Like, if we end up teammates, great. But I really don't like y'all. You don't have that right now. You don't have LeBron James hating Carmelo or Dwayne Wade because they're playing against each other for 5 years. They are friends. They're boys. They grew up together and doing AAU because it is a different mentality now with this AAU basketball. For Ben Johnson, when you think about Gophers basketball and what the next steps are, do you ever see an opportunity, and I know you would definitely be a part of it, but do you ever see an opportunity for a group of AAU kids from Minnesota to all be offered? And that's the problem, is when you offer it, I mean, think about Michigan with Jimmy King and Ray Jackson. Theoretically, a lot of coaches might not offer those two nowadays because they weren't like really, really, really great. Like it would be like, I can save these scholarships for other guys. I do want Jalen Rose. I do want Chris Webber. I do want Juwan Howard. But do I really want these other two guys? Can you see a coach, biting the bullet and saying, you know what, I would take all 5 of y'all if y'all will come now? Or is it just too many opportunities now, like you said, with cell phones, social media, for that to work now?
It just depends on the situation. Like right now, we got Isaac Asuma and Grayson Grove, who are both from D1 Minnesota AAU team.
Yep.
That's committed, but it depends on the team and the talent, I think, right now. And also just it's a lot of factors in college basketball where we got the portal and NIL deals where it's not just easy to keep kids working together as far as stuff become more individualized even within that package deal. Like one isn't happy after a year or see something different, then they changing out of it and they're going to, make their next move and try to find the best situation for themselves. So it's a lot harder to do, but it still happens a lot. I mean, it's a lot of teams. It's more now where sometimes the package is coming from you playing with one of your boys you did play AAU with, but as juniors after both entering the portal at the same time, kind of less than the school's not recruiting as many high school kids as they were before.
Yeah, and so, thinking about recruiting, thinking about Gophers, you got to transition a little bit here. Two quick ones before we get out of here. Brian Johnson is Damian Johnson, head coach of Benil St. Margaret, but Gopher all-timer on the basketball list of scoring, Gopher hoops guy. I watched a lot of old, because Trevor Mbakwe loves to post old stuff, whether it's, somehow Damian Johnson ended up getting dunked on or something. I forgot what he tried to show me one day. But I know Trevor Mbakwe is a big-time comedian when it comes to stuff that happened in games, because I know he's been caught slipping a couple times, he said. But when you look at Gopher sports, when you think about Gophers women's basketball, you think about, Robertson, you think about Janelle McCarville, and then, of course, everybody knows Lindsay Whalen. When you think about Lindsay Whalen coming back to coach, it was supposed to be a good thing, which it was. Recruiting-wise, she had one of the top recruiting classes ever in Gopher basketball history. And then she's asked to be a consultant, not a coach, because we do know this, just like Michael Jordan. Great players don't always make great coaches. Good players, solid players, make great coaches because they take to coaching. Great players sometimes just have it. Like, they just can do it. They just know it, and they don't know how to explain how they're doing it. And I don't know what the case is with Lindsay Whalen, but we know her recruiting class was ridiculous. Good. Mara Braun, all those other girls that came. I think the new coach probably is going to take her team and create something special. And people have to give credit to Lindsay Whalen, which is one of the reasons the Gophers offered her maybe a consultant position, because they're like, man, this girl can recruit. She can recruit, but we got to get some wins on this court. Do you think that weird feeling is going to go away eventually for how the Gophers handle that? Because they tried to make it sound mutual, and it wasn't mutual. Now that we're hearing that it was more so, hey, we want you to be a consultant, not a coach anymore. And Lindsay's like, look, just buy my contract out. I'm done. Do you think that's ever going to go away?
I think I feel like the new coach, we have some pretty good girls basketball players at Benil, and talking to our girls coach, the new coach is doing a great job building relationships around with coaches and everything in the basketball community. Also, Lindsay was a great recruiter. It's just tougher to start your first coaching gig at the Big Ten level, because it's a lot of factors. You coaching against coaches who've been there, been in those situations. It's a lot of factors, and I think her coaching also, you got to understand the temperament of kids. Now, she was coming from playing, so she had rookies on her team and everything, but that's not always the same as coaching college kids.
Right.
It's a lot different. I think that was part of her transition as well. And I think it was just she was in a bad spot because she was trying to do a lot of learning on the job, as well as she did a great job recruiting or getting players. I mean, it wasn't like we didn't have talent. It was just we didn't retain talent good enough. And that was one of her biggest issues. And I think as time passed along, I think eventually they're going to have to be able to mend the relationship with her if she felt slighted in some kind of way, because she's one of the top players of all time in school history, men or women. So you got to keep that relationship intact, and we got to have her around, because what she was able to do with recruiting and being able to sell, following in her footsteps to players is going to continue to help with recruiting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Like, she was thrown into the fire, baptized by fire. She had 4 McDonald's All-Americans that came to Minnesota, though, this past year. So clearly she was doing something right from a recruiting standpoint. I hope the new coach, I know she's, she's well known. She's already gotten some girls that want to transfer with her to Minnesota. So maybe her girls that were good there with the young girls Lindsay put together, maybe this is an early package. And it only takes 1 or 2 players to really turn a program around in basketball. Football, that doesn't work so much, but in basketball, for sure it does. And I think that's going to be the key. Like Tim Tebow, it wasn't Tim Tebow right away. It took Tim Tebow like 3 years to really get a stranglehold on the SEC. Cam Newton, same thing. It didn't happen to the end where he was the Heisman Trophy winner. So it takes time when you have that one person. Michael Vick, it took him towards the end of his career. Those last 2 years, he really took over. So again, it's not like, oh man, we get this guy in, we're just going to kill it. It doesn't work that way in football. Basketball, yeah. LeBron James could have went to any college and they would have been in the national championship, or at least in the Final Four, if LeBron James had picked a college back then, which probably would have been Ohio State. Unfortunately, I hate that. But speaking of LeBron James and Bronny and USC and USC and UCLA, they're coming to the Big Ten. How excited are you to get USC versus Minnesota basketball and UCLA versus Minnesota basketball from a fan standpoint?
the USC basketball part, I'm not too worried about. I'm waiting to go to the bank when it's USC football in here, and that's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
But UCLA basketball, I think that's going to be huge, and I just think that gives us, and I'm gonna give Ben credit, whereas he's actually doing a really good job of recruiting Cali, where he's getting at least on a lot of guys' radar. So that's opening up to where you get a home game every year, and we could kind of target some players from that way and kind of build those relationships and keep building off that. Even though it's a big weather change, it's an opportunity because Cali got so many players that's D1. We could get so many more guys for football and basketball now. Just we could catch some of the guys that may be right on the fringe of high major, that's sleepers that's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, and that's what Deshaun Foster, all-time running back, NFL running back, now running backs coach at UCLA. He said the same thing. He said, I'm looking forward to going into Ohio State now, going into Michigan to recruit because I can tell those kids, like, look, we're going to travel back to your hometown at some point to play in front of your family. Your family's going to travel out to here when you come play. When those teams come play out here, if your family wants to come, we're playing some of these Big Ten teams. We're going to be on the Big Ten network. So I think for USC and UCLA, you don't watch a lot of that in the Midwest and in the East Coast. But now you're on the Big Ten network. So now you're in the Midwest. Big Ten network is going to air UCLA basketball. They're going to air UCLA football, USC football. They want to see Caleb Williams on the Big Ten network because that's going to get views. And so that's a huge – and Fox is going to pick up a bunch of those games now because they're like, man, these dudes are in the Big Ten now. The Fox is with the Big Ten. So they're going to do it. NBC is going to be like, look, let's get that USC versus Ohio State game on we want to bid for that on ESPN. So USC and UCLA will get a lot of coverage now. But yeah, I was hoping, and I know it might not happen. Bronny might be a one and done, but I'm hoping Bronny sticks around for 2 years to where Bronny can travel to Minnesota, USC versus Minnesota. Bronny's in the build. LeBron, Savannah's going to show up in Minnesota. I want to be there for that. That's when I will ask. I've never asked for a media pass for basketball games, only football, but that's where I'm gonna flex my media muscle and be like, look, I want to sit right on media row. I want to be right down there in the front. I got to see this live. But yeah, and at that point, who knows? Maybe Ben has the Fab Five of Minnesota, and he gets 5 freshmen and go out there and just get it done because they all want to play against USC and UCLA as well, or maybe some West Coast guys. Maybe it's 2 Minnesota rookies, freshmen, and 3 from California. Because you're right, California's a bigger state, way more D1 talent and opportunities, and kids are just going to Fresno. They're going to, but now it's like, hey, I can play in the Big Ten. All right, let me think about that. One quick one, man, before we get out of here. When you think about Lindsay Whalen, Ben Johnson, I always had the feeling that Lindsay Whalen had a longer leash because of her stardom. Clearly, she didn't. Ben Johnson now is the last of the kind of, I guess, because Lindsay and Ben felt like a package deal. They both were former players, both coaching. Do you think Lindsay Whalen's departure, I guess, maybe puts Ben Johnson out on the hot seat if he doesn't win within the next 2 years?
I wouldn't say if he doesn't win. I mean, definitely this year he has to they got to show signs of improvement. And I also think that improvement should happen. I think a lot of people are not looking at last year. The last 2 years has been completely new teams each year. Like this is the first year we got some continuity. So I think they're going to do a lot better this year just because now they had a year playing together. They know, everyone knows the system is not like the year before we only had Jameson returning. Now this year we got multiple guys returning, multiple key people with starting experience returning. So theoretically, I think we should perform better just because that chemistry, continuity, and understanding of what the coach's expectations are. So if we don't win, if we perform worse this year and next year, then it's going to be tough for him to be able to sell that he's going to get any more time. So it's just about how they perform this year, where you're showing signs of improvement, signs of life. And then the following year, we could keep building off that. And I think it could happen just because we're going to be older. And that's another thing. We played a lot of freshmen last year. So now we're playing older guys along with guys who are back for a second year. I think we should be better, but let's see first.
Well, I'm Ron Johnson. That's Damian Johnson, Gopher Hoops legend. We'll be back after a word from our sponsors from SiriusXM, but also we got the Daily 3 coming out. It's going to be 3 minutes, 3 questions, probably 30 seconds each today. We're going to go really fast at the end of the show. But I want to thank Damian Johnson for joining me on the Hang with Ron Johnson segment, and we'll be back after this. Well, SiriusXM is a proud partner with Locked On Sports Minnesota and the Ron Johnson Show. The Twins' hometown broadcast will be broadcasting the Boston Red Sox game tonight, beginning at 6:40 p.m. You can catch every pitch of the Twins' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Twins. The Twins did lose to the Red Sox 10-4, one game ahead of the Guardians. They have a 3-game stretch coming against the Tigers, June 25th. June 26th was kind of the time I thought they'd be out of first place. They're only one game ahead of the Guardians. I think it might be true. I hope those that went on and bet, if you bet that prop, I don't know if there was a prop out there for that the Twins will lose first place by June 26th. The prop might pay off. I don't know if FanDuel was offering it, but I hope they were. Well, now we got the Daily 3. That's 3 questions, about 30 seconds each. Take it away, Sam.
Let's talk Twins. It's not great right now, and it looks worse when Luis Arraez is down in Miami hitting .398. He's had 3 5-hit games this season, Ron, and he's the most exciting player in baseball. The guy the Twins got in return, Pablo Lopez, is 3-4 with a 4.4 ERA. Did the Twins get fleeced in this trade, Ron?
Yes. You don't trade offense for not like if it was Verlander, and not Verlander now, but and I don't know, maybe Verlander now would have been worth it too. But not a like legit arm that this guy's going to give you 20 wins. Like I don't think you trade that. That bat was too hot, and with Carlos Correa's 50 hits, 52 hits or whatever, I think that would have been a nice piece to at least be competitive in every game. And Sonny Gray, I mean, we know he's been injured, but I just don't like that trade. I don't like it. I'm always for a guy hitting 400. You got to keep him on the team. And everybody thought it was great because they got another arm. But now look at it. He's 50 hits ahead of the best Twins batter. To do the top 2 Twins batters, you'd have to combine them to even get close to what Luis Arraez is doing right now. So no, I don't like it.
Yeah, not a good look. Twins clinging to that lead in the AL Central. Next up, Dalvin Cook said he wants to form an epic tandem with DeAndre Hopkins for their next destination. Do you think it's realistic, Ron, that D-Hop and Dalvin will be a package deal?
I'm not going to say a package deal, but I could see him will it because he said he wanted a 4 to 5 year deal. He's not going to settle for $4 to $5 million. He wants a big deal. You're not going to get a big deal if you're following D-Hop. And I think that's where reality is going to meet expectation. Mm-hmm. He might have an expectation of what he's worth and what this tandem can get. But the reality of it is I'm probably more willing to pay D-Hop than I am Dalvin Cook just because of the way the league's going. If I am Bill Belichick, because we've seen him take the visit to the Patriots. He also took the visit to the Titans. The Titans are looking for a receiver, but they're not looking for a running back. They have Derrick Henry, unless they're going to move from Derrick Henry, and I don't see them doing that, or unless Dalvin Cook wants to be the lightning to his thunder. So I could see him wanting to do it. I think maybe the Patriots might be the only landing spot for a duo like that right now. When you go around the league and think about who has room for receivers but won't take a running back, the Patriots probably will take both, and so that could work there.
All right, last up, I know you're a big Dan Patrick guy. I was listening to Dan Patrick yesterday, and they were brainstorming Victor Wembanyama nicknames. What are we going to call this guy after he gets drafted by the Spurs tomorrow night? A couple ideas he had, V-Dub, Baby Yama, Escar Goat, the croissant over dribbler, like crossover dribbler, the croissant over dribbler. What do you think? What do you think about nicknames for Wembanyama?
So the GOAT one and that croissant one definitely had to be from the boys in the back row because they are constantly throwing out terrible stuff. V-Dub, I'm guessing might have been either it might have been Fritzy or it might have been Dan. I'm just guessing because they usually have pretty normal stuff. I like V-Dub. I do like V-Dub. Wembanyama. It's just, oh man, I don't know. That's a tough one. Like Victor Doom, but that's more of a Fantastic Four reference. Victor was was Dr. Doom in Fantastic Four, which meant he could catch, like everything would come to him because he could control metal. So I don't know if that's one. But I don't know if you want Doom in your name. I don't know if that fits the NBA. I can see that fitting the defensive linebacker or DN in football. But I don't know if basketball wants that. But yeah, I don't know. I do like V-Dub though. V-Dub, I could even see him partner with Volkswagen for sponsorship. So yeah, I do like V-Dub. But those other ones, the GOAT, when you can't call him the GOAT early, because right now to me, he's Chet Holmgren. He hasn't done anything. So show me what you can do. One, stay healthy. Can you make it to your rookie year? that you're better than Chet Holmgren, because we don't know. Chet Holmgren might be the GOAT. We don't know what's going to happen with these young players. Pablo Banchero, he might end up, becoming like a Carmelo Anthony type. Nobody's going to be LeBron James, but he might become a Carmelo Anthony type where he becomes like a star in this league as well. So you just don't know. But I do like the V-dub. I don't know. That's the one that sticks with me. The croissant over, that's trying too hard. That's trying way too hard. That's writing way too much into that book. But I'm Ron Johnson. That's Sam. I actually want to thank you guys for joining us today on the Ron Johnson Show. Remember, you can download us on XM Radio app. You can download us on Amazon Fire and Roku. Just search Locked On Sports Minnesota. You can download all of our videos. Also, YouTube. All you need is an email address. Just go to YouTube, plug in your email address, and then hit the subscribe button. Hit the subscribe button, and you'll get all the videos every time we load them up. But I want to thank you guys. And remember, please subscribe. Subscribers matter no matter where you get your iTunes, Spotify, iHeartMedia app. Just hit the follow and subscribe button. I want to thank you guys. Have a great day.